At 0647 hours on December 4, 1943, Lieutenant Harold Morrison sat in the navigator's compartment of B-24 Liberator, Devil's Own, 18,000 feet above the North Sea, staring at two pencil lines on his navigation chart, one red, one blue. One would follow orders, one might save lives. The sound filled everything. 4 Pratt & Whitney R1830 engines, 2,000 horsepower each, thrumming through the aluminum airframe. The vibration rattled Morrison's navigation table, made his pencils dance across the charts, turned his coffee cold in its thermos. The smell was hydraulic fluid and gun oil and frozen metal. -30 degrees outside. The heated suit kept him alive but couldn't stop the cold from seeping through the plexiglass nose, condensing his breath into frost patterns that obscured his view of the grey sea below. Morrison's hands hovered over the chart. The red line showed the briefed route from VIII Bomber Command headquarters, southwest approach to Emden submarine pens, crossing the German coast at Ben Sarsil, bomb run northeast. Standard procedure. The route every navigator in the formation expected to fly. The route that had killed 4 crews in the previous 2 missions to this target. The blue line showed Morrison's unauthorized calculation. Northwest approach, crossing at Norden, 12 minutes longer, 8 miles farther. A route no one had approved. A route that violated standing orders, a route that could get Morrison court-martialed. His finger traced the red line. October 18th mission, 2 B-24 seconds destroyed. November 11th mission, 2 more destroyed. 32 men dead because they flew where the Germans expected them. Captain Robert Hayes's voice crackled through the intercom. Navigator, confirm heading to initial point. Morrison's hand moved to the microphone switch. 40 miles to target. 18 B-24 seconds in formation behind him. 180 men following his navigation. He keyed the mic. Heading 293 degrees, sir. Northwest approach. 5 seconds of silence. At combat speed, 5 seconds meant Morrison's formation travelled 450 yards. 5 seconds felt like hours. Hayes's voice came back, careful and controlled. That's not the briefed route, Morrison. No, sir, it's not. Another silence. Morrison heard his own breathing inside the oxygen mask, heard the engines, heard nothing from Hayes. Then, you're sure about this? Morrison looked at his notebook lying open beside the chart. 23 aircraft lost in November, 138 men killed. He'd known 11 of them, had played poker with Lieutenant Kowalski 2 nights before Kowalski died, had helped Captain Webb carry his footlocker to his bunk when Webb arrived in September. Webb never made it to December. Morrison keyed the mic. Yes, sir. I'm sure. Hayes didn't hesitate. Then we're committed. All aircraft, follow lead aircraft. Heading 293. The 458th Bombardment Group had been dying for 60 days. November 1943. 23 aircraft lost in 30 days. 138 men killed in action. 54 captured and imprisoned in German POW camps. The group's operational strength collapsed from 48 aircraft to 25. Loss rate, 47% monthly. Unsustainable. At this rate, the entire group would cease to exist in 8 weeks. The problem was simple and brutal. VIII Bomber Command navigation protocol required formations to approach targets along the shortest routes. The rationale made sense. Minimize flight time, conserve fuel, coordinate with fighter escort timing. Routes were established by staff officers at headquarters in High Wycombe, England, calculated for maximum efficiency. To Bremen, southwest approach, every time. To Hamburg, south approach over Denmark, every time. To Emden, southwest approach over the Frisian Islands, every time. The Germans had 24 months to map these corridors. They knew where American bombers would fly before the proceeded. Americans took off. 88mm and 105mm flak batteries were pre-positioned along predicted routes. German fire control officers could calculate American bomber positions with 90% accuracy. They didn't aim at where the bombers were. They aimed at where the bombers would be in 8 seconds. Americans flew into walls of pre-aimed steel. November 3rd, Lieutenant Kowalski's crew shot down approaching Bremen, standard southwest route, all 10 men killed. November 8th, Captain Webb's crew hit over Hamburg. Crashed in the North Sea. 8 men killed, 2 rescued after 4 hours in freezing water. November 14th, Lieutenant Chen's crew destroyed over Wilhelmshaven. 9 men killed, 1 survived the crash and was captured. Morrison had known these men, had eaten breakfast with them in the mess hall, had played cards with them on nights when nobody could sleep. Their bunks emptied within hours. Personal effects packed and shipped to families who would never see their sons again. Morrison filed a report with Group Intelligence on November 16th, 14 pages. Flak pattern analysis. Alternative route calculations. Projected loss reduction, 62%. Major Richards, the intelligence officer, read it, filed it, said, "Routes are established by VIII Bomber Command based on comprehensive analysis. We don't have authority to modify them." Morrison tried again. "The Germans know our routes. They're waiting for us. Your concerns will be forwarded through proper channels." "How long does that take?" "Weeks, possibly months." "Men are dying now, not in months." Richards looked at Morrison with tired eyes. "That's not your decision to make, Lieutenant." But Morrison understood the mathematics. German flak batteries positioned in kill zones 15 to 25 miles from major targets. Concentrated fire began 8.2 miles before bomb release point. Duration of maximum danger, 3.7 minutes on average. In those 3.7 minutes, American formations absorbed 70% of total flak damage. Flak accuracy in predicted zones, 600-yard kill radius. One 88mm shell exploding within a 600-yard radius could destroy a B-24 Liberator. The Americans were flying into pre-aimed shooting galleries, and headquarters wanted more time to study the problem. Morrison stopped waiting for permission on December 3rd. He calculated alternative approach routes for 6 targets, routes that deviated 15 to 20 degrees from standard corridors. Routes that would force German gunners to recalculate firing solutions in real time instead of shooting at predetermined coordinates. Now, at 18,000 feet over the North Sea, Morrison had committed 180 men to his unauthorized route. If he was wrong, they would die. If he was right, he might face court-martial for violating orders. Either way, men would stop flying predictable routes into German guns. The formation turned to heading 293 degrees. Northwest, 40 miles to Emden. 40 miles. To find out if a mathematics teacher from Portland, Oregon, could outsmart the German Luftwaffe. Lieutenant Harold Morrison was 28 years old the first time he watched a man die for following orders that made no sense. March 8, 1943. His first combat mission. Target, Rouen, France. Morrison flew Navigator on Lieutenant Eddie Grant's crew. Grant was 32, experienced, had flown 12 missions before Morrison joined the group. Grant followed his briefed route exactly. Approached from the southwest, just like the navigation plan specified. German flak batteries opened up 8.4 miles from target. Third burst hit Grant's aircraft in the No. 2 engine. The B-24 fell 12,000 feet in 90 seconds. Grant and 9 men died in the crash. Morrison survived because he wasn't on that crew for the next mission. He'd been reassigned to Captain Hayes's crew the day after Grant died. Standard procedure. Dead crews got replaced. The war continued, but Morrison couldn't stop thinking about those flak bursts. They'd appeared exactly where Grant's aircraft was going to be, not where it had been. German gunners weren't tracking targets. They were predicting them. Morrison had been a high school mathematics teacher in Portland, Oregon. Before the war, Lincoln High School. Taught algebra, geometry, trigonometry. Navigation was applied mathematics. Velocity vectors, wind triangles, great circle routes. He'd enlisted in February 1942, 2 months after Pearl Harbor, navigation school at Selman Field, Louisiana. Graduated July 1942, ranked 3rd in his class of 87 students. The Army Air Forces needed navigators. Morrison was good at mathematics. The connection seemed obvious. What made Morrison different from other navigators became clear by his 5th mission. Other navigators calculated courses, followed briefed routes, checked their drift every 10 minutes, got their crews to the target and home. That was the job. Morrison did all that. But after each mission, while other navigators went to the officers' club to drink and play poker and try to forget, Morrison went back to the empty navigation room. He spread maps across the tables, marked every flak burst location with red pencil dots, recorded coordinates where German fire had been most accurate, noted timing, when flak started, when it peaked, when it diminished, built a database other navigators never thought to create. By November 1943, Morrison had flown 19 missions. He'd watched 11 aircraft from his group get shot down. The pattern was consistent and undeniable. Formations approached targets along briefed routes. German flak opened up with devastating accuracy 30 seconds before the initial point. Bombers fell. Morrison's notebook grew thicker. More red dots, more coordinates, more calculations. The mathematics teacher in him saw what the military system couldn't. The Germans weren't reacting to American bombers. They were waiting for them. November 16, 2000, 300 hours. Morrison sat alone in the navigation room, spread maps from 19 missions across 3 tables, marked every flak burst location with his red pencil. Hundreds of dots across maps of Germany. Then he saw it. The dots weren't random. They clustered along specific corridors leading to major targets. To Bremen, concentrated red dots in a 15-mile corridor southwest of the city. To Hamburg, concentrated dots in a 12-mile corridor south of the city, over Denmark. To Emden, concentrated dots in an 18-mile corridor southwest, over the Frisian Islands. Morrison pulled out his mission logs, checked approach headings for every Bremen mission. 73% approached from southwest. Every Hamburg mission, 68% from south. Every Emden mission, 81% from southwest. The Americans were predictable, the Germans were prepared. Morrison started calculating. If American formations approached Bremen from northwest instead of southwest, a 15-degree deviation, German flak batteries positioned for southwest approaches would need time to adjust their firing solutions. How much time? Morrison had watched German flak patterns for 19 missions. He'd timed their adjustments when formations deviated slightly from expected positions due to wind drift. Average adjustment time, 30 to 40 seconds. 40 seconds at 180 miles per hour meant a formation would travel 2.1 miles before German gunners could correct their aim. That was 2.1 miles closer to target with reduced flak exposure. The math was simple. Duration of maximum danger on standard routes, 3.7 minutes on average. With a northwest approach forcing German adjustment, approximately 1.4 minutes of concentrated fire. Reduction in flak exposure, 62%. Morrison calculated alternative approaches for 6 major targets that night. Bremen, northwest approach instead of southwest, adds 10 minutes flight time. Hamburg. Southwest approach over North Sea instead of south over Denmark, adds 14 minutes. Emden. Northwest approach instead of southwest, adds 12 minutes. Each alternative route added time and fuel, but each route approached from angles German batteries hadn't pre-sighted. The trade-off seemed obvious to Morrison. 12 extra minutes versus 62% reduction in losses. He filed his 14-page report with Major Richards on November 16th. Included maps, calculations, alternative route proposals. Richards read it, nodded, said he'd forward it through proper channels. Morrison asked when he'd hear back. Richards said weeks, maybe months. November 24th, Morrison flew a mission to Munster. He wasn't lead navigator, couldn't control the route. The formation followed the briefed southwest approach. Morrison predicted flak would open up 8.2 miles from the initial point, bearing 045 degrees. Actual result: flak opened up 8.4 miles from IP, bearing 042 degrees. Morrison's prediction: 97% accurate. 3 aircraft severely damaged in the flak barrage. 1 went down. 8 men killed. Morrison had calculated an alternative northeast approach for Munster. His analysis showed that route would reduce flak exposure by 58%, but he wasn't lead navigator. He couldn't change the route. He could only watch the formation fly into predicted fire and watch men die. November 28th. Morrison asked Richards about his report. Richards said it had been forwarded to division headquarters. Morrison asked when division would respond. Richards said these things take time. Morrison asked how many men would die while headquarters took their time. Richards said that wasn't Morrison's concern. December 1st, 1943. Mission to Solingen. Standard southwest approach, exactly as Morrison had predicted, would be deadly. 4 aircraft destroyed in the first 90 seconds of the bomb run. 28 men killed, 2 captured. Morrison sat in the mess hall that evening at 1830 hours. His food tray sat untouched. Around him, chairs that had been filled that morning were empty. Lieutenant Parker's chair. Captain Morrison's chair, no relation. Sergeant Wallace's entire table. 28 men gone. Morrison's report had been filed 7 days earlier. Those men died while headquarters considered his analysis. Captain Hayes sat down across from Morrison. Hayes was 32, insurance adjuster from Chicago before the war, Morrison's pilot for 8 months. 23 missions together. You look like hell, Harry. Morrison stared at the empty chairs. We flew straight into their guns. Same route I said would kill us. You filed your report. Intelligence filed it somewhere. Men still died. Hayes studied Morrison for a moment. What do you want to do about it? Morrison looked at Hayes. Change the routes. You can't do that. Routes come from High Wycombe. Then men keep dying while headquarters reads reports. Hayes said nothing for 10 seconds. Then, show me your calculations. Morrison's quarters were cold that night, December in England. The barracks heating barely worked. He sat on his bunk at 2100 hours, holding a letter he'd found in his dead roommate's footlocker. Lieutenant David Ellis had been Morrison's roommate for 6 months. Navigator on Lieutenant Kowalski's crew, shot down November 22nd over Bremen, following the standard southwest route. Ellis's bunk across the room had been empty for 9 days. Morrison had packed Ellis's personal effects himself. Found the letter inside Ellis's navigation kit, dated November 22nd, the morning of the mission, addressed to Ellis's wife Mary in Seattle, never sealed, never mailed. Darling Mary, if you're reading this, I didn't come home. Morrison had read it once, sealed it, mailed it to Mary Ellis with his own note explaining her husband died quickly, which was probably a lie but seemed kinder than the truth. Now Morrison sat holding Ellis's navigation kit, thinking about 28 men who died yesterday while headquarters considered his report. He opened his notebook. 23 aircraft lost in November. 138 men killed. 11 of them Morrison had known personally, had eaten with, had talked to. Kowalski, Webb, Chen, Ellis. Statistics became letters to widows. Morrison made a decision. Better to face court-martial than watch more men die following orders that made no sense. He walked to the navigation room at 2200 hours. Empty. Most navigators were at the officers' club, drinking, playing cards, trying not to think about tomorrow's mission. Morrison spread maps across the work table, started calculating. Intelligence briefings suggested the next probable target was Emden, submarine pens. The group had hit Emden twice before, October 18th and November 11th, 4 aircraft lost total, 32 men dead. Both missions used the standard southwest approach, crossing the German coast at Bensersiel. Morrison traced the standard route with his finger. Red pencil line from England to Emden, southwest approach. Flight time from English coast, 87 minutes. Fuel consumption, 1,240 gallons. Predicted flak exposure based on previous missions. 8.2 miles of concentrated fire, 3.7 minutes of maximum danger. He pulled out a clean chart, drew a different route in blue pencil. Northwest approach, crossing the coast at Norden instead of Ben Cecile. Flight time, 99 minutes, 12 minutes longer. Fuel consumption, 1,420 gallons, 180 gallons more than standard route. B-24 fuel capacity, 2,780 gallons. Fuel reserve after Morrison's route, 1,360 gallons. Still safe margins. But the critical calculation was flak exposure. German batteries were positioned for southwest approaches. Morrison's analysis of previous missions showed concentrated flak began immediately when formations crossed at Ben Cecile, because German gunners knew exactly where to aim. With a northwest approach crossing at Norden, German batteries would need time to adjust. Morrison had timed German adjustments across 19 missions, when formations deviated from expected positions due to wind drift or navigation errors. German accuracy dropped for an average of 38 seconds before fire control crews recalculated. 38 seconds at 180 miles per hour, 1.9 miles of formation travel. If Morrison's northwest approach forced German batteries to adjust, the formation would advance 1.9 miles closer to target before concentrated fire began. That meant flak exposure would drop from 8.2 miles to approximately 6.3 miles. Reduction, 23%. But Morrison's calculations went further. The northwest approach would also position the formation 1.2 miles north of where German batteries had their pre-calculated firing solutions. That spatial deviation would reduce accuracy even after German gunners adjusted. Combined effect. Predicted flak exposure reduced from 3.7 minutes to approximately 1.4 minutes. Reduction, 62%. Morrison calculated 5 more alternative routes that night. Bremen, Hamburg, Wilhelmshaven, Osnabrück, Munster. Each route deviated 15 to 20 degrees from standard approaches. Each added 8 to 14 minutes flight time. Each reduced predicted flak exposure by 55% to 65%. The mathematics were clear. The question was whether Morrison had the courage to use them. At 2,330 hours, Morrison walked to Captain Hayes's quarters, knocked. Hayes answered in his undershirt, had been writing letters. "This better be important, Harry." Morrison held up his charts. "I have alternative routes for the next 6 targets." Hayes looked at Morrison, then at the charts. "Come in." Morrison spread the maps on Hayes's small desk, showed him the Emden calculations. Standard route in red, alternative in blue. Hayes studied the numbers for 3 minutes without speaking. "This adds 12 minutes. "Yes, sir." "Why?" "It approaches from an angle the Germans won't expect. Forces them to adjust their firing solutions. Cuts our flak exposure by more than half." Hayes traced the blue line with his finger. "You calculated this yourself?" "Yes, sir." "Does anyone else know?" "No, sir." Hayes looked at Morrison. "You have authorization for this?" "No, sir. If we use this route and something goes wrong, we both face court-martial. You for calculating it, me for approving it." Morrison met Hayes's eyes. "If we use the standard route, more crews die. The Germans know where we're going. They're waiting for us." Hayes sat down on his bunk, picked up the letter he'd been writing. His wife, back in Chicago. He set it down. "How confident are you in these calculations?" 90%. "Not 100? "Nothing's 100% in war, sir." Hayes stood. Looked at the maps again. "Show me the rest." Morrison showed him all 6 alternative routes. Hayes studied each one. Asked questions about fuel margins, fighter escort coordination, timing. Morrison had answers for everything. Had spent 6 weeks calculating, checking, recalculating. Finally, Hayes looked up. "If I approve this, you understand what we're risking?" Yes, sir. Court-martial, possibly prison. And if we follow the standard route? Morrison tapped his casualty notebook lying on the desk. 4 out of 18 aircraft didn't come back from the last 2 Emden missions. That's 40 men. Hayes was quiet for 10 seconds. Then he closed Morrison's notebook. We're using your route. I'll take full responsibility if it fails. Morrison felt something release in his chest. Relief mixed with terror. Thank you, sir. Hayes shook his head. Don't thank me yet. We still have to fly it. He looked at Morrison. If this works, you'll save lives. If it doesn't work, we'll be facing charges. Either way, after tomorrow, everything changes. Morrison gathered his charts, walked back to his quarters. Didn't sleep. Lay on his bunk, staring at the ceiling, calculating approach angles in his head. Across the room, Ellis's empty bunk reminded him why he was doing this. At 0400 hours, the charge of quarters knocked on doors. Mission briefing in 30 minutes. Morrison got dressed, walked to the briefing room, and prepared to violate direct orders from VIII Bomber Command. The briefing room at 0430 hours smelled like coffee, cigarette smoke, and fear. 72 men packed into metal folding chairs. Pilots, co-pilots, navigators, bombardiers from 18 B-24 crews. The room was never warm enough, breath condensed in small clouds. Men sat with their hands wrapped around coffee mugs, trying to absorb heat before climbing into aircraft at -30 degrees. Morrison sat in the back row, navigation chart case on his lap. His unauthorized route calculations were inside, hidden under the official charts. His hands were steady, but his stomach felt tight. In 90 minutes, he would either save lives or destroy his career. Major Stevens, the group operations officer, stood at the front beside a large wall map covered with a canvas sheet. Stevens was 42, balding, had flown B-17 seconds in 1942 before transferring operations. He pulled the sheet off the map. Gentlemen, today's target is Emden submarine pens. A red ribbon stretched from Horsham Street Faith across the North Sea to Emden. The standard southwest approach Morrison had predicted. The route that had killed 32 men in the previous 2 missions to this target. Stevens used a pointer to trace the route. 18 aircraft. Altitude 18,000 feet. Bomb load. 500-pound general-purpose bombs. 5,000 pounds per aircraft. Total ordnance on target, 90,000 pounds. He moved the pointer along the red ribbon. Fighter escort, P-47 Thunderbolts will take us to the German border. P-38. Lightnings will meet us over the target area. Expected opposition. Heavy flak intelligence estimates 60-plus batteries at Emden. Moderate fighter activity, 20 to 30 Bf 109 seconds expected. Morrison stared at the red line on the map. It crossed the German coast at Bensersiel, exactly where German flak batteries would be, and waiting. He'd marked that exact position with red pencil dots in his notebook. 4 aircraft destroyed there in previous missions. Stevens continued. Weather is clear, visibility 10 miles. Excellent bombing conditions. Previous missions to this target encountered heavy flak starting approximately 8 miles from bomb release. Expect the same today. 8 miles of concentrated fire. Morrison's calculations showed 3.7 minutes of maximum danger following that route. His alternative northwest approach would cut that to 1.4 minutes. But Stevens didn't know about Morrison's calculations. Nobody did except Hayes. Lead aircraft will be Devil's Own. Captain Hayes, pilot. Lieutenant Morrison, navigator. Morrison felt every man in the room glance at him. First time he'd been assigned as lead navigator. Lead navigator controlled the entire formation's route. Where Morrison flew, 180 men followed. Major Richards, the intelligence officer, stepped forward, pointed to marks on the map southwest of Emden. German flak concentrated in these positions. Heaviest fire here, here, and here. Richards's pointer touched the exact locations Morrison had marked in his notebook. The kill zones. Expect fire to begin approximately 8 miles from target, Richards said. Standard defensive formation. Stay tight. Stragglers get picked off. Morrison wanted to stand up, wanted to shout that they were sending men into pre-sighted firing zones, that the Germans knew exactly where they'd be. But he stayed silent. If he objected now, Stevens would remove him from the mission. The unauthorized route would never get tested. Stevens checked his watch. Aircraft commanders, collect your mission packets. Take off at 06:45. Questions? No one spoke. This was the 23rd mission to Emden since the group arrived in England. Everyone knew the drill. Fly the briefed route, drop the bombs, come home. Some wouldn't make it back. That was war. Dismissed. Good luck. Men stood, stretched, filed out toward the aircraft. Morrison stayed in his seat, staring at the red line on the map. The route that would kill men today if he followed it. Hayes appeared beside him. You ready? Morrison picked up his chart case. Ready. They walked outside into cold darkness. 0520 hours. Aircraft engines were already being pre-flighted across the hardstands. Morrison could hear the cough and rumble of radial engines starting, crew chiefs testing systems. Hayes stopped Morrison 50 yards from Devil's Own. Last chance to use the briefed route. We can still follow Stevens's plan. Morrison looked at Hayes. 4 crews died following Stevens's plan. If we use your route and it fails, we both go down. If we use the briefed route, men die for certain. Morrison opened his chart case, pulled out his alternative route calculation. The Germans are waiting for us at Bensersiel. They know we're coming. They've known for 2 years we always approach from southwest. Hayes looked at the chart. Blue pencil line showing northwest approach. Numbers showing fuel consumption, timing, predicted flak exposure. You're asking me to bet 180 lives on your mathematics. I'm asking you to stop sending men into kill zones they don't have to fly through. Hayes was quiet for 10 seconds. Wind blew across the airfield, carrying the smell of aviation fuel and exhaust. Show me one more time. The full calculation. They walked to the operations building, found an empty office. Morrison spread his charts on a desk, showed Hayes everything. The flak pattern analysis from 19 missions, the casualty statistics, the alternative route that would approach Emden from northwest instead of southwest. Standard route crosses at Bensersiel, Morrison said. Germans have batteries pre-positioned. They don't aim at where we are. They aim at where we'll be in 8 seconds. They've had 2 years to perfect their firing solutions. He traced the blue line. Northwest approach crosses at Norden. Different batteries, different positions. They'll have to adjust their aim. That takes 40 seconds based on my observations. In 40 seconds, we travel 2 miles closer to target before they can hit us accurately. Hayes studied the numbers. This adds 12 minutes flight time. 12 minutes versus cutting flak exposure by 62%. What about fighter escort? They're expecting us on the briefed route. We're deviating 15 degrees, not flying to a different target. Escorts will find us. Hayes looked at Morrison. How many times have you calculated this? 14 times. Checked it 14 times. The mathematics are solid. And if you're wrong? Then I'm wrong. But if I'm right and we don't try it, men die who didn't have to. Hayes folded the chart. Handed it back to Morrison. Use your route. I'll handle the radio calls when other navigators notice. Morrison felt relief and terror in equal measure. Thank you, sir. Don't thank me. Just get us there and back. They walked to Devil's Own. The crew was already aboard. Morrison climbed through the nose hatch, moved to his navigation station. The compartment was cramped, cold. His table was barely large enough for charts and navigation instruments. He strapped in, arranged his tools. The bombardier, Lieutenant James Chen, squeezed into the compartment beside him. Chen was 26, from Sacramento, had flown 15 missions. First time leading the formation, Chen said. Nervous? Morrison pulled out his charts. Official briefed route on top, his alternative route hidden underneath. A little. We'll be fine. You're a good navigator. Morrison didn't respond. Chen didn't know Morrison was about to violate direct orders and risk court-martial. Didn't know 180 men were about to fly an unauthorized route because Morrison believed his mathematics more than he believed VIII Bomber Command. Hayes's voice came through the intercom. All crew, prepare for engine start. The number 3 engine coughed, caught, roared to life. Then number 4, number 1, number 2. The aircraft vibrated, alive. Morrison checked his watch. 0630 hours. 15 minutes to take off. He looked at his 2 charts. Red line and blue line. Orders and survival. He made his choice before today, but now it felt real, permanent. In 15 minutes, there would be no going back. Hayes's voice. Navigator, you have the course. Morrison keyed his mic. Yes, sir, I have the course. He didn't say which course. Not yet. Devil's Own lifted off runway 24 at 0647 hours. 65,000 pounds of aircraft, fuel, bombs, and 10 men. The B-24 clawed for altitude, 4 engines straining. Morrison felt the aircraft climb through his entire body, felt the wheels retract, felt the transition from ground machine to flying machine. He looked down through the plexiglass nose. England disappeared behind them. The North Sea stretched ahead, grey and cold and endless. Formation assembly took 33 minutes. 18 B-24 seconds, climbed in wide circles over East Anglia, spiralling upward, finding their positions. Devil's Own held the lead spot at the formation's centre. Other aircraft stacked above, below, left, right. Combat box formation designed for mutual defensive fire. If German fighters attacked, the formation's combined guns created overlapping fields of fire. Stay tight, stay alive. By 0720 hours, all 18 aircraft were in position. 18,000 feet. Morrison could see the entire formation through Devil's Own's plexiglass nose. 72 tons of bombers, 180 men, all following Morrison's navigation. Hayes's voice on intercom. Navigator, give me heading to initial point. Morrison stared at his 2 charts. The official briefed route showed heading 087 degrees, east-southeast, straight to Ben Cecile on the German coast. The route every aircraft commander expected to fly. The route Morrison knew would kill men. His alternative route showed heading 073 degrees, east-northeast, 14-degree deviation. Small on a compass, massive in consequences. Morrison's hand moved to the microphone switch. His mouth was dry. He keyed the mic. Heading 073 degrees, sir. Hayes responded immediately. 073 confirmed. Coming to new heading. Devil's Own banked left. The formation followed. 180 men turning to Morrison's unauthorized course. The radio came alive within 30 seconds. Lead navigator, you're off briefed heading. Lieutenant Cooper's voice from another aircraft. Morrison keyed his mic. Heading confirmed. 073 degrees. That's 14 degrees north of briefed course. Confirmed. Another voice. Lieutenant Barnes. Lead, are you correcting for wind drift? Negative. This is our course to target. More voices now. Morrison heard confusion, concern. Navigators across the formation were checking their charts, comparing Morrison's heading to the briefed route. Realizing this wasn't a navigation error, Captain Whitmore's voice cut through. Lead aircraft, confirm you have authorization for route deviation. Hayes took over. All aircraft, maintain radio discipline, follow lead aircraft, heading is confirmed. Silence. But Morrison knew every navigator in the formation was marking the discrepancy in their logs, noting that lead navigator had deviated from the briefed route without explanation. When they landed, there would be questions, possibly charges. Morrison calculated wind drift, updated his position every 6 minutes. The formation flew northeast instead of east-southeast. Every mile took them farther from the expected route, farther from where German batteries would be aimed. Chen stood beside Morrison, watching the compass. We're way north of the briefed track. I know. Want to tell me why? Morrison looked at Chen. We're approaching from an angle the Germans won't expect. Chen was quiet for a moment. Does operations know? No. Does anyone besides Hayes know? You do now. Chen looked at Morrison's chart, saw the 2 course lines, understood. You're gambling with 180 lives. I'm trying to save them. Chen nodded slowly. Okay. I trust you. At 0831 hours, the German coast appeared ahead, thin brown line against grey sea, the Frisian Islands. Morrison could see individual towns through the plexiglass. The standard route would cross at Bensersiel, visible 20 miles south of their current position. Morrison's route would cross at Norden, dead ahead. Hayes. P-47 escort is departing. Thunderbolts at their fuel limit. Morrison watched the escort fighters peel away, heading back to England. The formation was alone now. Vulnerable to German fighters, vulnerable to flak. Everything depended on Morrison's calculations being correct. Navigator. Time to IP? Morrison checked his chart. 12 minutes to initial point. Understood. All gunners, test fire your weapons. The waist guns hammered briefly. Morrison felt the aircraft shudder. The .50 caliber machine guns were loaded, ready. The ball turret rotated beneath the aircraft. The tail guns traversed left and right, everyone preparing for combat. Morrison stared ahead at the German coast. Somewhere beyond that coastline, German flak batteries were positioned for American bombers approaching from southwest. German fire control officers were calculating firing solutions based on 2 years of data, showing Americans always approached Emden from the same direction. But today, Morrison's formation was approaching from the northwest, 14 degrees off the expected course. The Germans would have to adjust. Morrison had calculated they'd need 40 seconds to correct their aim. 40 seconds meant his formation would advance 2 miles before concentrated fire began. 2 miles closer to target with reduced exposure. The mathematics were solid. Morrison had checked them 14 times. But mathematics worked on paper. War worked in blood and steel. At 0847 hours, Devil's Own crossed the German coast at Norden. Morrison marked the time in his log. Below them, the small German town passed beneath the formation. Church steeple visible. Roads. Houses. People who would be calling flak batteries right now, reporting American bombers overhead. Then the sky erupted in black smoke. German flak opened up, 88mm shells bursting at 17,000 feet. Morrison counted 6 bursts, 8, 12, 16. Black puffs blooming around the formation like deadly flowers, but the bursts were scattered, not concentrated. 400 yards left, 300 yards behind, 200 yards low. The Germans were searching, adjusting. They hadn't expected bombers at this position. Their pre-calculated firing solutions were wrong. Morrison watched the flak pattern, started counting seconds. 22, 26, 31, 38. At 38 seconds, the flak began, concentrating closer. German gunners had corrected their calculations, but in those 38 seconds, the formation had traveled 1.9 miles. Morrison's prediction, 40 seconds. Actual, 38 seconds. 95% accurate. Hayes's voice. Navigator. Flak is lighter than briefed. Your route working? Morrison keyed his mic, felt something release in his chest. Germans weren't positioned for this approach, sir. They've adjusted now, but we gained 2 miles. How much time to target? 8 minutes to bomb release. Chen moved to his bomb site. I can see Emden. Submarine pens straight ahead. Morrison marked their position. Everything was working exactly as his mathematics predicted. The Germans had wasted precious seconds adjusting fire. The formation was deeper into German airspace than it should have been before encountering concentrated flak. Men were going to survive today because Morrison refused to follow the briefed route. But the bomb run was still ahead. 8 minutes flying straight and level. 8 minutes where the formation couldn't evade. 8 minutes where German gunners could prove Morrison wrong. At 0850 hours, Devil's Own reached the initial point. Morrison keyed his mic. IP now. Bombardier has control. Chen hunched over his Norden bomb sight, made final adjustments. Airspeed, 180 miles per hour. Altitude, 18,000 feet. Wind, 12 knots from the northwest. He dialed the corrections into the bomb sight, let the gyroscope stabilize. Bomb bay doors open, Hayes announced. Morrison felt the aircraft shudder as the doors swung down. Drag increased. The B-24 slowed slightly. Behind them, 17 other aircraft opened their bomb bay doors. 90,000 pounds of high explosive ready to drop. The formation flew straight and level. Required for accurate bombing. No evasive maneuvers, no turns. The pilots locked onto the lead aircraft, maintained tight formation. For the next 8 minutes, they were predictable targets. German flak intensified. Batteries at Emden opened up with full concentration. Morrison counted bursts. 40, 60, 90 in the first minute. Black smoke filled the sky. The sound came through the aircraft hull, dull crumps, shrapnel rattling against aluminum like hail, but the accuracy remained scattered. German gunners were firing heavily but aiming for where American bombers usually appeared during southwest approaches. Morrison's formation was 1.2 miles north of that position. At 0853 hours, the Germans corrected. Flak bursts began appearing at the formation's actual altitude and position. Closer now. 200 yards, 150 yards, 100 yards. Morrison felt Devil's Own shudder from a nearby blast. Looked left, saw holes punched in the wing. Shrapnel damage. Not critical, but close. Radio calls. Aircraft 237, number 3 engine on fire. Aircraft 445, hydraulic system hit. Morrison looked back through the plexiglass. Saw a B-24 inches, the second element, trailing black smoke. Another aircraft with visible damage to its vertical stabilizer, but no aircraft falling. No parachutes. Chen's voice, calm and focused. 30 seconds to release. Hayes held the aircraft steady. Flak burst 200 feet below them, shrapnel clanging against the belly. Another burst above, fragments pinging off the top turret. 20 seconds. Morrison watched the submarine pens appear through breaks in the smoke. Massive concrete structures. German U-boats inside. 10 seconds. Bombs away. Morrison felt the aircraft leap upward as 5,000 pounds dropped free. Across the formation, 90,000 pounds fell toward target. Devil's Own touched down at Horsham Street Faith at 1,047 hours. 4 hours since takeoff. Morrison climbed out of the nose hatch, legs stiff, hands numb from cold. Ground crew swarmed the aircraft, inspecting damage. Crew Chief Sergeant Martinez met Morrison at the wing. "How was it, Lieutenant?" "Target destroyed. Everyone made it. Back." Martinez looked surprised. "Everyone? No losses? 5 damaged, 3 wounded. No one killed." Martinez walked around Devil's Own, counting holes. 17 shrapnel punctures in the left wing, 8 in the fuselage, 4 in the tail. "You got chewed up pretty good. Could have been worse. Last 2 Emden missions we lost 4 aircraft total. Today, nothing." Martinez looked at Morrison. "What you do different?" "Changed the route." Before Martinez could respond, Morrison walked toward the debriefing room. Other crews were already gathering. Pilots and navigators clustered in small groups, comparing notes, checking damage reports. Lieutenant Cooper intercepted Morrison. "What the hell was that route?" "Alternative approach. You were 14 degrees off, briefed heading." "I know." "Did Stevens authorize it?" "No." Lieutenant Barnes joined them. "You just made up your own route?" "I calculated an approach the Germans wouldn't predict." "And it worked," Barnes said quietly. Cooper stared at Morrison. "You violated direct orders." "Everyone came home. You're going to catch hell from operations." Barnes nodded slowly. "But everyone came home." At 1,115 hours, Major Richards conducted the mission debrief. All crews assembled in the briefing room. Richards stood at the front with his clipboard, going through the standard questions. Target assessment? Chen answered. Submarine pens hit, observed multiple explosions, heavy damage to structures. Flak assessment? Haze. Heavy volume but less accurate than previous missions to this target. Richards paused. Why less accurate? We approached from an unexpected angle. Richards noticed the discrepancy in the navigation logs. Multiple navigators had noted the route deviation. He looked at Morrison. Lead navigator, explain your route deviation. Morrison stood, approached from northwest instead of southwest. Why? German flak batteries were positioned for southwest approach based on previous mission patterns. Northwest approach forced them to adjust firing solutions, reduced their accuracy. Did you have authorization to modify the briefed route? No, sir. The room went quiet. Everyone understood what Morrison had just admitted. Unauthorized route deviation violated standing orders from VIII Bomber Command. Hayes stood. The decision was mine, Major. Morrison recommended the route. I authorized it. Richards looked at Hayes. Captain, you don't have authority to modify briefed routes. No, sir, but I have authority to make tactical decisions to protect my crew and formation. Richards wrote something on his clipboard. Previous 2 missions to Emden following standard routes, 4 aircraft lost, 32 men killed. Today's mission using Lieutenant Morrison's route, 0 aircraft lost, 3 men wounded. He looked up. The numbers spoke for themselves. I'm forwarding this to Colonel Hatcher. He'll decide what action to take. At 1,400 hours, Morrison and Hayes stood in Colonel William Hatcher's office. The group commander sat behind his desk, Morrison's notebook open in front of him. He'd been reading it for 5 minutes without speaking. Finally, Hatcher looked up. You violated direct orders. Hayes. Yes, sir. Risked the entire formation by flying an uncoordinated route. Yes, sir. Fighter escort could have missed you. Germans could have been positioned for your route. Morrison spoke. Sir, may I explain? Hatcher gestured. Go ahead, Lieutenant. Morrison showed Hatcher his flak pattern maps, the red dots marking burst locations from 19 missions, the calculations showing German battery positions. The alternative route mathematics. German batteries are positioned along our standard routes. They've had 2 years to map our approach corridors. They know where we'll be before we take off. They're not aiming at us, they're aiming at where we'll be in 8 seconds. Hatcher studied the maps. Morrison continued. Alternative routes force them to recalculate in real time. That takes 40 seconds based on my observations. In 40 seconds, we travel 2 miles closer to target before they can hit us accurately. Flak exposure drops by approximately 62%. Hatcher closed the notebook. This is thorough work, Lieutenant. Thank you, sir. But you still violated orders. I should court-martial both of you. Long silence. Morrison could hear the wall clock ticking. Hatcher. But we lost 23 aircraft last month following standard routes. You lost 0 today. I want to see if this was luck or if your theory holds. He looked directly at Morrison. You'll fly lead navigator on the next 3 missions. If loss rates stay low, I'll forward your technique to division. If crews die, you'll face charges. Clear? Morrison, yes, sir. Hayes. Yes, sir. They walked out of Hatcher's office. Hayes stopped Morrison in the hallway. You just bought yourself 3 more missions as lead. Think you can do it again? Morrison thought about 23 aircraft lost in November, thought about Ellis's letter to his wife, thought about 32 men who died flying predictable routes to Emden. Yes, sir. I can do it again. Morrison flew lead navigator 3 more times in December 1943. Bremen on December 8th, northwest approach instead of standard southwest. Result: 17 aircraft returned, 1 crashed on landing in England with the crew surviving. 0 deaths. Previous Bremen missions following standard routes had lost 4 aircraft. Hamburg on December 13th, southwest approach over the North Sea instead of the standard south approach over Denmark. 18 aircraft returned with minor flak damage. 0 deaths. Previous Hamburg missions had lost 3 aircraft. Osnabrück on December 18th, northeast approach instead of standard east. 16 aircraft returned, 2 heavily damaged but flyable, 3 men wounded. Previous Osnabrück missions had lost 2 aircraft. Standard routes to these targets had cost 9 aircraft and 54 men killed in previous missions. Morrison's alternative routes: 0 aircraft lost, 0 killed, 3 wounded. By December 20th, word spread through the 458th. Other navigators wanted to know how Morrison was doing it. Colonel Hatcher called a meeting. All 24 navigators from the group assembled. Morrison stood at the front with his maps and calculations. He showed them the flak patterns. Explained German battery positioning. Demonstrated the mathematics. Approach angle deviation of 15 to 20 degrees forced German gunners to recalculate. Time required: 40 seconds. Distance gained: 2 miles. Reduction in flak exposure, approximately 60%. Some navigators were skeptical. Captain Brennan: this violates doctrine. What about fuel consumption? Morrison: average addition is 10 minutes flight time, roughly 180 gallons. B-24 carries 2,780 gallons. We have margin. Lieutenant Matthews: what about fighter escorts? Deviations are 15 degrees, not different headings entirely. Escorts still find us. By January 1944, 6 navigators from the 458th were calculating alternative routes. By month's end, all navigators in the group used Morrison's methodology. The 458th's loss rate dropped from 47% in November to 12% in December through February. Other groups noticed. Captain Thomas Bradley from the 466th Bombardment Group met Morrison at an officers' club in Norwich. Your group's losses dropped to nothing. How? Morrison explained. Showed Bradley his calculations. Bradley took the technique back to the 466th. Within 2 weeks, they were using alternative approach routes. By February 1944, Brigadier General James Hodges at 2nd Bombardment Division Headquarters noticed both groups had 62% fewer losses than division average. He called Morrison to Ketteringham Hall. Why wasn't this reported? Through proper channels? I reported it in November, sir. No response. So you violated orders? Men were dying, sir. Hodges studied Morrison's analysis for 20 minutes. I should discipline you, but your technique saves lives. I'm authorizing all groups in 2nd Division to use alternative approach routes. I'll recommend theater-wide adoption to VIII Bomber Command. In April 1944, VIII Bomber Command issued Directive 44-12. Lead navigators are authorized to calculate alternative approach routes when intelligence indicates heavy flak concentration along standard corridors. No mention of Morrison. No mention of the 458th Bombardment Group. The technique became official doctrine without acknowledgement of its origin. Morrison read the directive in the operations room. Hayes found him there. They took your technique. Didn't mention your name. I don't care about credit. Crews will stop dying. Morrison completed 35 missions by June 1944. Flew lead navigator 18 times. 0 aircraft lost on missions he navigated. He received the Distinguished Flying Cross for exceptional navigation skills under combat conditions. The citation made no mention of alternative routes. He returned to Portland in October 1944. Married Elizabeth Harper in December. Resumed teaching mathematics at Lincoln High School. Worked there for 37 years. When students asked about his medals, Morrison said, I navigated bombers. Did my job. Between December 1943 and May 1945, 14 bombardment groups across 2nd and 3rd Divisions used Morrison's technique. Conservative estimates, 3,200 missions flew alternative routes. Loss rate dropped from 8.2 aircraft per 100 sorties to 3.1 per 100. Approximately 163 aircraft saved. At 10 crew per aircraft, 1,630 men who came home. More conservative accounting for other factors. 180 to 200 aircraft saved, 1,800 to 2,000 lives. Harold Morrison died March 15, 1989, age 74. His obituary mentioned his service as a World War II navigator. Did not mention he changed how the 8th Air Force approached targets over Germany. Did not mention 200 crews survived because he refused to follow orders that killed men. The navigators knew. The pilots knew. The official record ignored him. Sometimes survival requires breaking rules. Sometimes innovation comes from teachers with notebooks, not headquarters with doctrine. Sometimes the right answer means refusing to do what you're told. 200 bomber crews came home because one navigator saw a problem and fixed it, without permission, without recognition, with nothing except the knowledge that men were dying and something had to change. If this story moved you, remember Harold Morrison's name. A mathematics teacher from Portland who saved 2,000 lives with a pencil and the courage to say no to orders that made no sense. Thank you for keeping his memory alive.